there's a bit more content and it goes into a little bit more depth in some topics. So just make sure in terms of, you know, if any revision sources that they use, resources that they're using the ones for the correct exam board. If you have resources already that are from AQA, it's not the end of the world, but just make sure that they are studying the correct sort of topics within that. So this is sort of a general bit of advice really, in terms of how to help your son or daughter, how to support them. At this stage, now is the time when you should be starting about thinking about making a revision timetable, and plan to do short bursts of revision. So it's no good to sit in a room with a textbook, with your phone by your side and your music on, just reading the textbook. Nothing is going to go in. So for your son or daughter, it's really important that they have the right sort of environment to help them with their revision, and you can support them with that in terms of where they're working and how they're working, making sure that they're reasonably well organised. So they've got a timetable, they know what they're studying when, and they've sort of spaced it. There's something called interleaving, which I think we'll hear a bit about when you go downstairs, which is we now know from research that your memory works. Being a biology teacher, this is kind of my thing as well. Your memory works when you look at something and then come back to it, maybe a few days, a couple of weeks, a couple of months, then it's going to stick in your memory. So keep going back to key words, key topics, and that's going to help you to remember when it gets to the exam because of this second nature. So this is specifically for biology. I could have picked any number of things to look at, but I thought this is pretty standard biology stuff. So for example, you could, biology is a lot of diagrams, a lot of keywords. So with the diagrams, you could ask your son or daughter to maybe label a blank diagram or just do a sketch for you and explain to you what it is that, what the different parts of the heart do, maybe what the names of the different parts of the heart are, maybe look at circulatory system. There's lots of things that they can do. That's just, one example of numerous things. Again, in biology, there's lots of keywords. So those keywords, there's lots of keywords for them to remember that they might find, difficult. The best thing to do, I would suggest, is to have keyword cards with the definition on one side and the keyword on the other. Keep going back to them, keep looking at them, and basically, the more you keep looking at them, the more you can help them by testing them. Say, right, tell me the definition of this keyword, or read out the definition, what is the word? That's an easy way of you being able to support them with that. And then I've got some sort of physics, can't even say it, physics specific ideas as well. So you've got a calculator there, because physics is very maths based, so there's probably a little bit of overlap between how to revise things in physics and maths, because they're quite similar. So it's really important that if they've got a calculator that they use in their science exam, that they know how to use that calculator and they recognise what all the functions are. Don't go and buy them a brand new fancy calculator the night before their exam, and then they find that they get into their exam and press a button and something funny comes up on the screen and they don't know how to fix it. I've actually seen that happen, and it's horrible because it's so easily avoided. So make sure they know how to use their calculator. Sounds basic, but it's important. And then in physics, the other thing, key thing for physics is that at the moment in this specification, they have to know all of these physics equations and be able to apply them in questions. So being able to recall, that's a very key thing for them to learn in physics. So help them by having those equations written down, using them to answer questions. So look at past paper questions, review the answers using a mark scheme, help them to unpick how those answers have been derived from those equations. I think that's all of physics. So now we're on to chemistry, which I will hand over to my colleague because she's the expert in chemistry.
Okay, so from the moment they come into chemistry, we encourage them to label the periodic table. The periodic table is the basis of everything we do in chemistry. So it's really important that they are able to label a periodic table. So we'd recommend you can get blank ones on the internet, print them off, and get your child to label them and explain to you about the different groups within the periodic table, what a period in the periodic table is, where metals and non-metals are in the periodic table. We have this acronym that we use, the PEN, which stands for protons, electrons and neutrons. So pupils should be able to, for any element in the periodic table, tell you the number of protons, number of electrons, number of neutrons within the atoms of that element. We also have this, the 2882, most pupils will recognise that as the maximum electrons that go in each shell around the nucleus, and they should be able to write the electron arrangement. So again, you could ask them to write the electron arrangements for you for any element up to calcium 20. After that it gets too complicated. So I would encourage you to get a blank periodic table and get them to label it and to show you where the groups are. They need to know the names of 4 groups within the periodic table, and that they can explain the groups to you. And we have some acronyms in chemistry that we use. So one of them is PANIC, so all pupils should be familiar with the acronym PANIC. So this is to do with the process of electrolysis, and so we give them this to remember. They have to remember the name of the positive and negative electrodes. So positive anode with negative ions, cathode. And then the process of electrolysis again has an acronym OILRIG, and that explains that oxidation is a loss of electrons and reduction is a gain of electrons. So the pupils helps them to remember the process by PANIC and OILRIG, quite stunning out acronyms for them.
We've been given our 2 minutes.
Oh, have we again? I couldn't just talk too much. Okay, just a couple of things about types of questions in the exam. Multiple choice. One of the most annoying things when you mark exams is that pupils have left multiple choice questions blank. Even if they do not know the answer, they have a 25% chance of getting the answer right because the answer is there. Okay, so we'd encourage, if you're practicing multiple choice questions with them using the mark scheme to get the answers, make sure they do not leave any blank. It is one of the first things I say to pupils when they're doing exams: don't leave multiple choice questions blank, because you've basically thrown away a chance of a mark. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. In each of the science exams as well, there will be a 6-mark question. Okay, so there will be one of those in physics, chemistry and biology, and they're in the combined sciences as well. If you're practicing these with them, get them to highlight keywords in the question. Answer it as bullet points. It doesn't need to be like an essay, it needs to be in bullet points, and review it with the mark scheme and get them to explain where their answers come from and compare it to the mark scheme. Yes, sorry.
Most important one.
Okay, and then we have loads of science resources. So from the exam board you can get past papers, mark schemes and examiner reports. There are obviously other exam boards, but obviously the content is slightly different. On Firefly, we have the textbooks are on Firefly. They're as chapters for each of the sciences. So use them to make mind maps, flashcards. There's questions from the end of the chapters. We can provide answers for those as well. Past papers on there and revision guide. And if they don't have one, please ask about one. And then we have some online resources. Kerboodle is quite a new one that we're using here. It's actually a really good resource. It's got a textbook on there, GCSE Pod, Seneca Learning and revision guides. So there are some of those online. Any questions?
Do you suggest that we get one of these for them to use at home to revise?
Yes.
We sell them at
Yes.
school, so
Yeah.
they can order them through school and we
Okay.
get a discount on them. So we generally organise that. at some point very soon.
Would that be at the student office or can we do it?
I think so, I'm not 100%
Yeah, you'll get a letter.
Right, thank
Probably,
you.
hopefully next week, all students will get a letter. You'll get emailed a letter with all